We continue our coverage of the massive $418 million realtor lawsuit settlement. This could have long-term effects for both first-time home buyers and real estate agents. Now, the National Association of Realtors was sued, the organization, accused of collusion against the American home buyer. My next guest explains more. And joining us on The Factor Uncensored tonight is Shad Bogany, real estate expert. Shad, we've been watching this case where now the National Association of Realtors have agreed to pay $400+ million to settle a lawsuit of what some have described as collusion. For those who don't have the backstory, as simple as you can put it, what happened in this case that's got us here today?
Well, what got us here was that sellers, attorneys went to sellers and said, hey, did you know that you were paying the buyer's commission? And the sellers all said, no, we didn't know that. And so they filed a lawsuit, but that is strictly laid out in their contract that they signed. And my whole thought on this is, Isaiah, is that the seller and the listing agent agreed to a commission fee. That commission fee, the listing agent has decided to share that with me if I bring him a buyer. I don't see where the seller was being harmed because his negotiations was with his listing agent, who's agreed to use his marketing dollars to help me, to come to me to try to sell his property or help him sell the property. And I think that's where it's been lost at, is that everybody keeps saying that the seller is paying these fees, but really in all reality, the buyer is paying these fees, because if the buyer doesn't buy the house, there's no fees at all and no commissions and no profit for the seller.
Now, where does the court and the plaintiffs have a problem with this?
Their whole point is that the seller was unaware that he was paying for the buyer's agent commission for the buyer. That's where the seller is upset about. But what I'm saying is that in our contracts, it says that he's agreed to a fee with his listing agent. What he does with that money shouldn't affect the seller. That's up to him. Now, the whole thought process, now we have this settlement, commissions are going to come down. I'm saying they're not going to come down, Isaiah, because the listing agent now has to do the job of two people. The buyer, first-time home buyers, will have no representation. And so you got unintended consequences involved in here. And have you ever seen a for sale by owner sell his house for less because he didn't list it with the realtor? Every seller is trying to get the most dollars. That doesn't mean they pass it on to the buyer in that process. And so I just think it's going to really hurt first-time home buyers. I think it's going to cause an issue out here, because before I show a house, now I got to call the listing agent. Hey, what are you going to pay me if I bring you a buyer? Right. Oh, well, you need to put that in writing. So because I'm not going to go out there and you later tell me you didn't agree with that. Right. And this is what happens in a commercial transaction. And commercial transactions kind of like the Wild Wild West, where now it's going to be the same way in the residential. And there's a lot more going on in a residential transaction, from helping the buyer to negotiate, helping them get insurance, helping them get the right loan, talking to them about first-time home buyer programs. Who's going to do all of that? And I'm riding around with you, showing you houses. How am I going to know that I'm going to get paid? Or I'm now going to charge a flat fee before you get in my car. You need to write me a check for $500 for me just to go show you this house. It's just open up a can of worms, and I just think the unintended consequences is going to hurt the industry.
And for those individuals out there who may be first-time buyers, how difficult will it be on them to proceed without that real estate agent on their side?
There's nobody out there looking out for their best interest. How are they going to, you could go to har.com and pull up houses and look, but how are you going to get in those houses? Are
Right.
you going to go meet the listing agent out there? And the listing agent who represents the seller is not going to tell you anything about the house because he can't, because he has a fiduciary right to the seller. I just think the first-time home buyer, we fought very hard many years ago to get what we call buyer agency because buyers didn't have any representation. Now we have it, and then we've got attorneys who said, oh, I see a golden goose here. Let me go and tell sellers that they were paying for the buyer's commission. All sellers knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Every seller knows that they are paying to help sell their house. And everybody brings up that is in Europe, people are paying 1%, 2%. But what they're not saying about Europe is that all the sellers now paying for marketing, advertising, and then they're being taxed on that extra money. So what I've heard from consumers in Europe and sellers in Europe, it's really not giving them any advantage. They love the system that we have here because it's structured. And now we go into an unstructured system.